Hey guys, so last week we looked at this thing which was called the tabernacle, which is kind of like a tent, and how God's presence lived inside this tent. And how we learned later that our bodies was kind of like this tent or this tabernacle, and how God's presence was with us. But today, I want to look at another sort of lesson that we can learn from the Israelites. You see, we've been sort of following them while they've been in the desert, and there's been a couple lessons that we can learn. And one of them today is actually looking more to ourselves. So we're going to look at the Israelites, which were the people of God that were in the desert, the people that God saved out of Egypt. And we're going to see them because we're going to kind of imagine what was going through their minds. You see, they were actually complaining a lot. They loved to complain. They absolutely loved to complain. So we're going to look at 3 times where they complained, and God was like, cool, sharp, I'm going to help you guys out. But it seemed as though they were never, ever satisfied. So let's have a look at those 3 times. So the story of these three times that the Israelites complained. So they're in the desert, they're busy walking, and they've been walking for a long time now. And they started to get very hungry. They started to get very tired. They started to get all sorts of things while being in the desert. And so what did they do? They complained. So they complained to Moses, and they were like, Moses, how can you take us out of Egypt? We are so hungry. At least in Egypt, you know, we had some sort of food. Yeah, we were slaves. Yeah, we got beaten, but at least we had some sort of food. And now we're out in the desert and we've got nothing. So Moses was like, okay, all right. So Moses went and he spoke with God, and God came to them and said, listen, I've heard all of your grumbling. I've heard all of your complaining. So what I'm going to do is tonight you guys are going to have meat. You guys enjoy meat. I'm going to send some quails, and you're going to enjoy it. So that's what God did. And still the people then later on they complained. No, we're hungry, we're this. And so God was like, okay, fine, I've heard you grumbling. So what I'm going to do is in the mornings, every single morning, right up until the end of when you leave this desert, you're going to get like this bread from heaven, which is kind of like bread, but at the same time they didn't really know what it is. And it was stuff that was called manna, which in Hebrew means what is it? So when the people the next morning came out to come and collect this bread from heaven, or this manna, in Hebrew what they were actually saying is, they were saying, what is this? What is this? So every time they would take it and eat it, so it would be like, what is this? And it was kind of like bread, but at the same time it had a honey sort of flavor to it. And we have no idea what it looked like. But every morning God gave them this manna. And God asked them to do 2 things. Number 1, he said, do not take more than you need. He said, just take enough just for that day, because tomorrow you're going to have some more. Then the second thing God asked them to do was on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath day, meaning that's the day of rest. They mustn't do anything, that they must not go out and look for manna, because there won't be any manna. But what they must do is the previous day, they must take double the amount of manna. So God asked them just those 2 things. But do you think they listened? No. You see, the first one when he says don't take more than you need, still people, they took a whole bunch more than they needed, and the next morning whatever they had was actually rotten, it had maggots, and it wasn't that great. And still people just didn't listen. They would always just take more and more and more than they needed, knowing that tomorrow there's still going to be this manna on the floor. And the second thing that God asked them, which was on the 7th day there's going to be no manna, so the previous day they must take double. So that was the only day that they could take more. But when they actually came to take more that day, when the Sabbath day came, which was the next day, they actually still went out to look for this manna. And Moses was kind of like, guys, I told you there's going to be no manna here on the Sabbath day, on the 7th day. But do you think they listened? No, not really. So we kind of got this cool picture of the Israelites, of the people of God. They first grumbled, they moaned, they complained, they fought with Moses. You can actually read in the Bible how Moses, he was so sick and tired of these people. He was just like, they just won't stop complaining. Have you guys ever had some of those teachers in class where they're just like, oh my gosh, guys, you will not keep quiet. Can you please just keep quiet? And that's kind of the picture that we get of these Israelites. All they loved to do was complain. Complain and complain and complain. And then what we learned further is that God asked them, don't take more than you need. But what did they do? They took more than they needed. God said, take double on the 6th day, because the 7th day there's going to be no manna. Don't go out looking for more. But what did they do? they went out looking for more manna. You see, every time God actually was helping them, every time God was providing for them, they either wanted to take more, they didn't listen, or all they did was just think of themselves. They never thought of anybody else. All they thought about was themselves. And it seems as though they almost didn't even trust God, that God was willing to provide for them. God said, you're going to have this manna, this bread from heaven. It'd be really cool to actually have that bread. But you're going to have this bread of heaven all the way up until you actually leave the desert. But still, the people of God only thought about themselves. They loved moaning. They took more than they needed. They never listened to God or even listened to Moses. So what we learn from the Israelites is they actually were quite a selfish people. They were quite a selfish people, and probably right so. I mean, they were in Egypt, and Pharaoh had told them when to sleep, what to eat, when to eat, and how hard they had to work, which was they had to work extremely hard. I mean, they were slaves. So the Israelite people were actually quite selfish, selfish people. But it's something that we ourselves can actually look at. You see, the Israelites, they complained and they didn't do what they were told, even though God said, look, I'll look after you. We've entered into this awesome relationship, and I'll look after you. I'll give you food, I'll give you water, I'll give you all, everything that you need. Not what you want, but everything that you need. And so if we were to look at ourselves, you see, actually the human race sometimes is actually incredibly selfish. Sometimes we want more things than what we actually need or what we actually have. Sometimes we look at other people and like, wow, check what car they're driving. Oh man, I wish I had a better car. Or sometimes we look at their clothes and be like, sure, man, I really want to shop at a better place. I want to earn more money, or I want this, I want the better toy than my friend, or I want to have something better. And sometimes we even find ourselves even saying to our friends or to our family, being like, look, I've got this, but you've only got that other thing which is lower. I know when I was younger, my friend, he had a PlayStation 1. None of you guys probably have PlayStation 1s, but he had a PlayStation 1, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And all I wanted was a PlayStation 1 because, we never had. So I asked my mom, I want one. And she says, no, you don't need one. You don't need a PlayStation. And my friend often would come to my house being like, where's your PlayStation? I've got one, so you should have one. And it would make me feel bad. And I almost thought about myself, and I was like, no, I want to have more. So sometimes we can actually think very, very selfishly of ourselves. And what that can actually do is actually do a lot of bad stuff, for us. And it's something we can actually learn from, from the Israelites. That being selfish and just complaining and saying I want the whole time is actually not the best way about going with anything. They didn't even acknowledge and thank God for actually giving them manna, for giving them meat there, which was quails, these birds, for giving them water. I mean, God saved them out of Egypt, but they weren't even that thankful. All they did was just complain the whole time. And so you can imagine what God felt. So we should actually look at ourselves. You see, we are living in a house, or even if we have a car. If you guys are being able to watch this right now, it actually says you've either got a TV or a smartphone or a laptop or something, which actually shows that you are actually in a really good place. You are not, you almost have everything you need and more in terms of the stuff that you want. So I want you guys, and I want to challenge you guys to ask yourself, are you being selfish, or am I being selfish in some of the stuff that I've got? Do I constantly say, oh, I want this, or do you always look at other people and say, man, I wish I had more than them? So there was this one guy, his name is Lewis, or C.K. Lewis, and he said the only time you should ever be looking into somebody else's plate, meaning like looking over the fence to see if the grass is greener, or looking at another person, is to see if they have enough. So if you're going to look at their plate and their plate is empty, you should look at your plate and see, can I help this person out? You shouldn't be looking at their plate saying, sure, I wish I had more than what they've got. And so the only time you should be looking over at somebody else's plate is to see if they've got enough on their plate. And there is where we can actually start seeing how unselfish we can be. So if you're going to look at somebody else, only see if they have enough. Don't look at somebody else saying, oh man, I wish I had more than them. So that's my challenge to you guys, is where are you being selfish? Where am I being selfish? And ask that question, because you might find yourself asking maybe your parents or whoever else, or you might find yourself looking at somebody else saying, oh man, I wish I had more. Or even sometimes be like, oh, I'm so glad I've got more than that person. So I'm challenging you guys. Try to find those areas where maybe you are being a bit selfish and ask the question, how can I actually change that and maybe become more unselfish? You see, because Jesus was the most unselfish person in the world. He gave all he had, including his life for us. So that's my challenge to you guys this week. I'll see you guys next week, and yeah, enjoy your week further. For those of you guys who sent Mother's Day cards, I'm going to post some of them now, and you guys can see. So thanks for those who sent them through, and yeah, I hope you guys do something awesome for your moms. Because I'm going to be watching you through the TV, through the phone, the laptop, the whatever. Yeah, I'm watching you. See? Yeah, I can see you looking at me, looking at you. Cool. Check you guys next week.